And hi, everyone. That's the first couple seconds from the For Elise arrangement that I did in late 2016, and we premiered it early 2017. That is my dear friend Addison Fry on the piano, one of my favorite pianists of all time, and a colleague and just a dear friend. Hi again, and this is the fourth little score study video. For those of you new to this little series, the Jazz Arranging Facebook page asked me to do a couple deep dives on some pieces that I had written. And while I think there is lots of great music out there for you to check out, I'm just happy that they considered me among perhaps the least of them, but among them. So this is one piece that I'm really excited to talk about. While I love composing, and it's an important art and just really great thing, I really consider myself more of an arranger, and probably one of my favorite things to do is recompose something, reimagine something. And so this is, of course, for Elise by Ludwig van Beethoven, one of the most recognizable pieces of music. And it's been done so many different ways, so many times, and I thought I would take my own crack at it in this. We did this concert in early 2017 where we reimagined a number of works by Bach, Beethoven, Haydn, Mozart, and did a few original pieces as well. So that was the context for this, and basically I got to have free reign over this piece. And so I'm going to take you through some of the choices that I made, and we'll like before, we will start with I suppose we should start. If you want to check it out really quick, it's here on my YouTube channel, and it's a long piece, lots of solos, but they're really great. It's Mark Hartsuch right there on tenor and Addison on piano. They both sound incredible, and there's a lot of chart to go around too. I forget how many bars this was, 300, 400 or something. Anyways, but that's the piece. I recommend you go check it out now, so we have a little context before we dive in. And I thought we could start like we did with the All the Things You Are arrangement. This certainly started for me at the piano, starting with the original, of course, and then working out my reharmonizations, and that way I could orchestrate from this sketch score. I knew I wanted a very long introduction on a slow ballad sort of treatment of the theme, so that way I could develop all the things that I wanted to harmonically, and that would set the stage for everything that comes later. So we'll just briefly look at the first couple bars here. That's where more of the heavy reharmonization takes place. So as you notice, the first 8 bars are untouched, 9 bars, I suppose, because I always want to respect the source material as much as possible. And for people who might have forgotten what For Elise sounds like, this is what it is. And then I start my reharmonization. I wanted to structure it very carefully so it's not suddenly, you know, we have this very pleasant, and then all of a sudden it's wacky. No, I wanted to get there little by little, journey a little bit at a time. And so most of this is just reharmonization by inversion. You could think of this as A minor over F, and then of course E7 over G sharp. C major is almost the exact same thing as A minor, as far as note content, feeling very different. And then, of course, one of my trademark things is avoid tonic. Why land on A minor here? That is not, the piece needs to move on, and we want to hear the bridge. So that's why I took that liberty there. Now here at the bridge, we'll talk about the orchestration in a moment, but I really wanted to stretch it out. The bridge, as you know, is a bit shorter in terms of melodic material than the A sections. It's only like, I forget how many bars it is in the original, but it's less than 8. And so I felt like for balance sake, I wanted to stretch it out a little bit. And that also gave me some chances to explore some different textures right here. So I make a pedal point, which is great technique, and then we move away from that and get into some use. Of course, got to use that thing, and then here again, in the terms of why did I make the choice to go to 4/4 here? I wanted to stretch out the harmony. I want it's going to feel a bit more longing, more sentimental. I'm planning on going to strings here, and not sappy, but certainly very romantic. Beethoven, of course, romantic composer, and lots of intense emotional feelings, and I wanted to capture some of that as well. So I think the 4/4 really helps us get that sensation widening and allowing us to experience this a little with more time. Added a little interlude here, so that way there's a sense of a conclusion. We go back to the 3/4 for just a moment before going back to 4/4 and back to 3/4 again. So we'll look at what happens in this bar in a moment. And then this is the most intense reharm. Right? So that is, I've carefully constructed everything up until this point. So that way it is the climax of the introduction. And then we get into the vivace, and we are moving along into the blowing after a long interlude. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. This is where it started for me. I've been playing this song. I grew up a classical pianist, did classical piano for 10 years. And this was, of course, one of the pieces I played. And so I would, as a teenager, would mess around with harmony on this. And then finally started to revisit it after college. And with all these new harmonic tools and arranging things that I knew. And I was like, ooh, this is the stuff that I was hearing or trying to hear, but couldn't quite get there. And I'm sure if I did this piece in 10 years, it'd be completely different. But that's where kind of this piece came from. So let's jump into the full score here, and we can look at a few orchestration things. Definitely a better looking score. I decided to, even though it's orchestrationally incorrect, I put my horns in between my trumpets and trombones for orchestration purposes. But normally, of course, the horns should go on top of the trumpets, just because that's where they're operating in terms of register for me most of the time. So piano solo, like we said before. And the nice thing about having a world-class piano player play this is that you can give him slashes every once in a while, or even chord symbols, and Edison will fill things in that you couldn't have dreamed of that make it sound significantly better. But anyways, to this stretch moment where we bring in the orchestra for the first time. This is, of course, the bridge, and this was a fun little texture. Again, from my love of sevenths, and so what that is actually is this. It's the same material as the here, except I displaced it by an octave, so it sounds completely different. But that's where that material comes from, same as this here. And then the voicing is just a sus2 kind of structure. So little abstract and some little pads here in the strings, really simple. Half step on top, always I enjoy that. So anyways, but that's where that material comes from. When I can, I try to make everything related to the source material. Good old bassoon solo. And then this is where some more lush string orchestration happens. These are some of my favorite 6 bars to write. Spent a long time on this. For me, good string writing comes down to thinking like a string quartet. Of course, it's a string quintet in this case because I'm not using double basses in this orchestra. I don't think double basses are great, and they have their place. But in jazz orchestra, they don't have much to do because we have our acoustic bass here. And so I will often divide the cellos and use. I'd rather hire another cello player and have no contrabass section, and hire a good jazz bass player who can play arco. So, but just these lines, trying to, rather than thinking about these like pads, what's going to make it sound more classical and interesting is having more polyphony and subtlety to these lines. So that's where, and leaving space for yourself. So even though the melody's here, there's so much space, there's not really a whole lot happening. So that allows this string section to really shine and come through. And you notice only here at the end, near the cadence, that I go to all half notes, because Addison will be taking the main activity right here. Well, I got to keep moving, otherwise we'll never get through this. And then we have with all the kind of the theme of this concert was classical meets jazz, of course. And so interspersed with all these different jazz chords and harmonies is going back and forth, the dichotomy between classical and jazz, orchestrating like a classical composer, orchestrating like a jazz composer. This is a moment where I wanted to acknowledge the original material, not in terms of melody, but in terms of orchestration. And so this is just a really simple pa sort of a way, with the pizzicato and the cellos, and the Oboe tenutos with the strings here, oboe solo, clarinet solo, moving it around, as is very common with wind and other horn soloists, highlighting different colors to come out. This, of course, thank you to the brass, to then crescendos to one of our climaxes. Same bridge material, but now the strings have the melody, and the brass and the winds are taking these big chords, allowing the strings to shine through. So then we get to, of course, the and I thought, how cool would that be? Look, Beethoven's made a very lovely pedal. You could consider it an upper pedal or a lower pedal. In this case, it's an upper pedal because I do all sorts of different harmonic things underneath it. And so that's kind of where this came from. So even though that's what's happening in the horns there and the trombones, and then a lovely little flute solo, Rachel Wolf here. Knowing who I was going to play these pieces really allowed me to write virtuosically for some instruments that I wouldn't normally want to under normal circumstances, because I don't know what to expect. So it was fun having some really all-star players stacked throughout the entire orchestra, so then I could summon their very wonderful talents and let them go for it. And then this is a big altered chord stack. This is a big pyramid that whenever there's a pyramid, I try to orchestrate it from the top, making sure that everyone plays the line. You know what I mean? So this is everyone playing this line rather than each individual having an entrance, considering the pyramid that way. That's a big question. When younger writers are writing pyramids, that's a big question that people have. How do you do that? And this is the most effective way that I've seen. Occasionally, if it's moving slowly. Anyways, so we get into our last recap here with lots of reharmonization. Finally, give the piano a break. Let the orchestra really take over. And the big feature here, of course, is counterpoint. And so the melody is moving so slowly. So what's going to happen in all this time? Counterpoint. Trying to connect the different color tones between these really, well, I consider them really colorful chords. So and then we're coming down. This is our crescendo moment. We finally come down. We bring back the piano. Of course, a lovely sentimental clarinet solo. I love the clarinet for Sentimental. reasons. No, because it can be such a sentimental color, particularly in this lower register, shallow register, throat tone register, etc. Let the piano have the last word here. The spotlight back on the soloist, and then we move into eventually. I want to swing this thing. So how are we going to get there? Well, let's start with straight eighths, 3/4. We're moving along. The harp is going to be the harp and the rhythm section. The drums is really going to help keep the time, and we have a drone in the strings, and we're going to play with our motif and move it through a bunch of different key centers as we keep a pedal A in the harp this whole time. That's essentially, I mean, it's pretty obvious. That's all this is. This was the trickiest part to rehearse because I should have given people more cues. But yeah, just passing it along through different sections, allowing colors that often don't come to the forefront of the texture to do so. Viola and clarinet, stopped horns for dramatic effect there. Cellos coming through. As you can see, I'm just adding bit by bit. And we're finally, as it grows, we get to a climax moment where we finally get to swing eighths. Because at this tempo, really, the swing eighths aren't hugely different. I mean, there's a difference in articulation, but the interpretation is not super different. As the tempo speeds up, the eighth notes become more straight. And so, although there's so as you can see, I give the orchestration, the more swinging figures to the saxophones and the instruments that are more comfortable swinging. I'm not going to give it to the strings. And so this is just a constant structure. Oh, back here we have parallel fourths. Blah, blah, blah. And then another constant structure here with the trumpet, kind of a small group lead. So I think it's just the so what voicing, which is kind of a go-to of mine when I just want when it's a more chromatic melody, because then we get all these different chords imposed over the pedal. And of course, it's a big G pedal, which is going to set up our first modulation to C minor. Addison plays the solo break, and we are off to the races with his solo. And so we just had so much written material. It's time to let Addison go loose. I'm not trying to make this a 5 or 6 minute piece, obviously. I'm going to let the jazz musicians blow as long as they want to, especially Addison, as he's the primary guest feature. So I think he takes 2 or 3 choruses. Oh no, second time? No, we do it 3 times. Really, and then he wisely on his third chorus goes to octaves, spread octaves, which allows me to accompany him with the backgrounds. So that was a great choice. But even if he hadn't done that, I think these backgrounds would have worked pretty well because they're sparse, they're not getting in his way. I'm not trying to do big pads. And when there are longer notes, it's just unison. So that way he, doing backgrounds for a piano player is not the easiest job in the world, because the piano player can control the harmony. So I try to stay out of the way to allow them, so I don't have to step on their toes. They can be comfortable and express themselves however they want to. Kind of a similar thing, except this time we have the saxophone counterline happening at the same time as these chords. So it's a development on the background, which is always something I try to do. And then, of course, you saw this be-do-da. This is descending. And so naturally, the second time, I'm going to ascend. Who says ascend? Finally, we bring the strings in. Nice warm color on the bridge. Counterline in the horns here. That never really came through, the cut mute things, so I probably should have gotten rid of that. And of course, this is not very intense backgrounds right now. We're going to another chorus of backgrounds because, and actually it's going to be trading, which is a very common thing to do. Let the band trade with the soloist. Give the soloist a quick break, but then throw him right back into the action. Obviously from the bridge material, that's where that comes from. Again, trying to keep everything in the family, keep it all together, as linked as possible, and then let Addison respond. Unison rather than harmony, and then we have our harmonic explosion here. This is a rare case of where I'm trying to make the strings swing, and how I do that is through the bowing, and so give them the upbeat on the have them bow the upbeats and slur the downbeats. At this tempo, they can probably play it and it will sound swung because of the articulation there. Normally, I don't do that very much, just because string sections aren't comfortable doing that. But at this tempo, I think we can get away with it. More background, more intense. I'm going to be stepping on Addison's toes a little bit here, and that is just going to naturally happen. That's how I'm going to get the crescendo that I want. Later, you'll see that the tenor solo comes in, and why not just stop here at the end of the piano solo? Well, there's more to the tune. Part of the pride I have in this particular arrangement is that I use the entire composition and reimagine it rather than just the main theme, as you'll see here in a minute. And so if we're going to use all this material and have solo sections, then I want the second soloist to be even more intense than the first one. So saxophone seemed ideal, and we'll talk about the different harmonic choices I made there as well. And so this allows Addison, this is the climax of the solo, and we have and we're here, and boom, we land into a metric modulation here that allows us to really swing. I love this theme. Right? That's everyone. That's a less common theme, but it's definitely, I believe I guess this would be considered a rondo, the original. It's A, B, A, C, A. Finale just decided to quit on me. I'm very sorry about that. But so that's where my material that I wanted to use came from. And so to me, it just felt like it ought to swing. How lovely would it be if we really got this thing swinging right here? And it's going to swing harder, of course, if it is a slower tempo. So hence my rationale for a metric modulation here, going into getting out of the piano solo. So, and of course, how I set that up, ba da da 2 3 1 2 3 4. So as with all the things you can see I have a few trademark things that I like doing that are unashamedly. So, but that's where that idea came from, wanting to slow down and really let this section swing. This is letting and I'm using my saxophones, my trumpets, and my trombones, and the tuba. As you can see, I have a reduced orchestra here. I don't have a full big band. I wanted to have two more horns, and a few extra woodwinds. And I feel like I could use the horns and get away with only having 3 saxophones at once. So fortunately, I had a number of different doublers. Anyways, beyond the point. And of course, then we have this material, like I said before, that motif there from the original. I decide to use that verbatim. That is something that people hopefully will immediately recognize. And we have the dichotomy of classical jazz happening once again. It might be a bit campy, but I thought it worked in the arrangement, particularly because of the context of the concert and so on and so forth. And then I basically have a call and response between the piano and the orchestra, classical orchestra. So oboe, how do I orchestrate this? This is always a fun exercise. How do you orchestrate piano music? for the orchestra. You're not going to have someone play. You wouldn't want to do that. That would be not good orchestration. So as you can see here, I have the violins, which is essentially the same thing happening. And then we have our oboe moving, as these are two lines that I'm hearing. And so I'm not going to have the strings play 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, all those upbeats. That just doesn't make any sense. And then the left hand, of course, is here in the violins and cellos. And then the flute. And so I really just loved this so much. I wanted to do the same. I wanted to do it again, except I orchestrated. I moved it down to A major, which helps me establish the fact that this is fluid. We're moving around. We're going into a new key soon. And I get to orchestrate it differently. Bassoon and clarinet development, right? As much as possible, always. This might be my least favorite 4 bars of the arrangement. I wish I could go back and reorchestrate this. I don't know how at this particular moment. It's pretty campy. You know, it could be a lot more unified. And I think maybe maybe I could have done this material again, and then alter it slightly, and then go straight into this pedal point that launches us into our tenor solo here. So this is just, yeah. Hey, not everything's perfect. Was under the gun for this one, for sure, as with most of the pieces. So you write what you can. Anyway, those are the 4 bars I would really, really change. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, oh, you should change a lot more than that, Drew. But anyways, so then we get into the tenor solo here. And so we've done so much changes. And so it's time for a new vibe. I think sometimes less changes is more intense than more. And so really this is, let's go to the Coltrane Quartet here. Letting the tenor come forth, and you know, that way they don't have to worry about a whole bunch of changes. But then furthermore, this also works over the melody. All that McCoy-Tyner business. And so that allows the tenor to really rip. And these are some really odd backgrounds that I did here. But they were fun. 2 Barry saxes. Because I usually don't get to use 2 Barrys. But I had some really interesting doublers here. A bassoon player who played Barry, and then another Barry player who I also had played tenor and clarinet and bass clarinet. So it's good to have woodwind doubler friends. It's not super strong because the tenor's really blowing hard at this point. Mark is playing his butt off, but then it's kind of mirrored here, very low, woofy, reedy sounds, and then we have the 2 piccolos, you know, with our motif again, and it's going to really pierce through and just be enough distraction, I hope, to be like, to make the audience think, oh, what is that, you know, rather than, what is that, you know, the good kind of question mark. So, and we're growing here, getting into our bridge material here. And finally, our final pedal section, North Texas, all the way. Gotta love it. And essentially, this is the climax of the entire piece. Once again, with the so what voicing. Or is it? Actually, it's more dissonant than the so what voicing. But anyways, that's where I have the strings moving here. You know, very intense trills and really wild and violent shout chorus, trumpets, syncopated and all that. And then this allows the little repose here, the woodwinds to take the melody, let the trumpets get their face off the horn for a minute, and then back again with the shout chorus material. And it doesn't last long because I know we're just like this video is a little long. The piece is quite long, and so we need to move it along. and get to our last material here. And these are just stacked fifth voicings. That's all that is right there. And the harp helps us slow down, keeps some of this momentum while still being slower than before. And finally, we are in our last section here. This is probably another fun moment. Everyone recognizes that from the original, but I orchestrate it really differently. I use alto flutes, clarinet, bassoon, cup mute, and bucket mute, while these ost obbligato triplet things are happening in the strings. So it's like the murky storm. We're coming down, and this is a very, I take this out of the Gil Evans playbook, kind of a pandiatonic moment, but then these different colors, getting the bassoon into a nice high register, the alto flute as well, getting people in their uncomfortable registers. That's what part of the Gil Evans orchestration is. So hence where this kind of came from. And nothing to me is more sentimental than the oboe, which takes us out, which was also another favorite color of Beethoven's, of course. And then to a final cadence, and then we allow Addison to take it out as we began. So piano solo, finishing up the rest of the material, and then finally ending on the melody, and ending with a sus chord. I didn't want to end with a minor chord because it just seemed too resolute. There's so much that happened. I want the listener to decide how they feel about it. So hence the choice of a sus. It also just feels a little bit more jazzy, open, appropriate given the entire massive journey that we just went on. So yeah, a bit long-winded. Sorry about that. But I hope you dug that. Thank you so much for watching. If you dug it, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you if you have other questions about this. Yeah, hope to get in touch, and hope this was helpful. Thanks, and have a good one. See you later.